And welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming out this morning. A couple of things here as we get started. As we do each Sunday, I like to review our values, our core values that we have here at Cochranton Community Church. And for those of you that have been with me a long time, I like to start out with the value that Jesus had. Jesus valued one thing above anything else, and that was he valued people, right? Whenever we read the stories, Jesus is always valuing people. Now, at Cochranton Community Church, we have 8 core values, and I'd like to just take a moment to review all of those. Anybody have one of the 8? Bible. What'd you say? Bob, you had one. Now, but let me say, Sarah, let me just say thank you. Whenever I said one core value, when Sarah said Bible, I don't know if anybody saw her finger went up. Bible, I love that, love that, love that. So Bible, prayer, what else do we have, folks? Worship and relevancy. I missed one. Service, outreach, stewardship. And what's the last one? Community. And as I have shared with you before, any group of people that gets together has their own set of values. And what I have found as a value in this group is that we have 2. We have 2 values that are unique to this group. One of them is donuts. Yes, that's up there. That's up there. But another one, we can put that number 3, right? But what's one of them? Timeliness, right? So it's my intent to start on time and to get you out on time. And I have an update on that in just a moment. The other core value that we have in this group is growth, right? This is a group that gets together because we want to grow. We want to be better at the end of this lesson than we were at the beginning. That's our intent as we go through this. So again, I want you in a place where you grow. That's one of my values. One of my top values is growth. If you're not growing in this class, don't take this the wrong way. I don't want you in here. I don't want you in here if you're not growing. We have plenty of other options. Find some place where you are growing. So that's where we are. Now, also with the core value of timeliness, we have to be done and we have to be out of here relative to the second service. So I need your help with this. Now, Trace said, why don't you just take the clock that's usually on the whiteboard and why don't you just put that on your counter? And I will do that, but I need you guys to hold me to it. So I'm going to ask you to take out your phone and set an alarm. It's a little bit different than last week. Set your alarm for 10:32. 10:32. That's what I'm going to be wrapping it up. And if I'm not, we're going to have to put the afterburners on to blow through some of those things. So that's where we are. Let me also just give you this heads up. Next week, the topic that we will be looking at is faith and persistence. Faith and persistence. So I've taught on persistence. It's been a couple of years ago, but we'll be revisiting that topic. So if that's of interest to you, just so you know what to be looking forward to next week, and if you want to invite anybody, maybe you will, maybe you won't. So that's what we're looking at next week. This week, we're going to be looking at a topic that I don't believe I have taught on before. I don't believe I've taught on this before, and it's a bit of a mysterious topic, and it's the topic of giving and serving. Now, there's fancy words that we use in church circles, and one of those fancy words for giving is tithing. So, this is new grounds for me. So, when we talk about giving and tithing, I want you to know this: it's not just about money. It's not just about money. It's about giving of our time, our talent, and our treasure. Right? That's what we're looking at. This is why I've pulled serving into this lesson. Now, when we look at the concept of tithing, a lot of that goes back to the law that Moses brought forth. But if you study your scripture, you'll find that tithing actually happens many hundreds of years prior to that, right? The first time that I found that this was illustrated in Scripture was a story featuring Abram. This is Abram before he became Abraham, right? So this goes way back. And he had gone on a conquest, he had conquered, and then he was working with Melchizedek, who was the king of Jerusalem. This story is recorded in Genesis chapter 14, verses 18, 19, and 20. It said, "Then Melchizedek, king of Salem," later Jerusalem, "brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, 'Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivers your enemies into your hands.'" And then the last part of this story reads, "Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything." He gave him a tenth of everything. You see, God gives Abram this blessing, and what does Abram do? He turns around and he gives some back. And we have this precedent that's established. 400 years later, this process will be formalized under the law of Moses. I have a couple of verses here, one from Leviticus chapter 27. Leviticus chapter 27, verses 30 through 32. It reads, this passage, it reads, a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Whoever would redeem any of their tithe must add a fifth of the value to it. Every tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy to the Lord. Numbers 18, 21 through 24 reads, I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. So what we see here is that there is this process of giving to be able to power other work being done. Okay, that's what we have. Now, I think it's also important to note this. Tithing is so important that it's one of the few things that God challenges us to challenge Him on. Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, God says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me on this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Now, why is this? Why do we have this concept of tithing? Why do we have this idea of giving? Why do we have this idea of serving? And I would say this, why is it also such a big part of discipleship? I'm going to share with you a framework that I shared a few weeks ago. If you're newer, you may not have seen this before. If you've been here for a couple of weeks, maybe you have. We'll see if this works. But it's a concept that I call the 7 levels of awareness. Okay. Now we're going to blow through this pretty quick, just to help. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in reverse order. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, 7 is the highest level of awareness. 1 is the lowest level of awareness. Now, the lowest level of awareness is the level of animal. All right? This is a highly reactionary level of awareness. You poke the bear eats you, right? It's pretty straightforward. It's very, very reactionary. The second level is the herd level of awareness. And this is where people go through life and they're just doing what everybody else does. What are you doing? This is what you're doing? Oh, I'll do that too, right? The next level is, eventually we go through this time where we're part of a herd and we get this level of dissatisfaction and we say, maybe I should do something different. And this is the level of aspiration. This is where you say, you know what? There's got to be something better than this. And it's sort of an exciting level to be at. but it's also a very dangerous level to be at, because you'll have people that will aspire to do things, and people will encourage you to do that. Some of you would say, you know what, I think I should join a Bible class. I think I should start a Bible class. I think I should go to the gym. I think I should do something. And people will encourage you. They'll say, yes, you should do that. That'd be a great thing for you to do. But you don't do it. You don't do it till you get to the fourth level of awareness, which is the level of individual expression. Now, this level expression, this level is tough because it hurts. This is the level that is so tough because it hurts. Whenever you say, you know what, I really should go to the gym, you go, and now you step out at level 4 and you have that individual expression, you go to the gym, what's the next day like? Ouch! It's like, ouch, it's painful, right? You step out and you get hit. You step out and you get hit. And there's a lot of folks that, from the perspective of their faith, right? They're going through, they're doing what everybody else does, and then they hear the story of Jesus. And they say, you know what, maybe I should have a relationship with Jesus. And they have that aspiration, and then finally they step out in faith, they step forward, and you know what happens after that? A lot of times people find out that their friends turn on them. Right? There's a lot of hardship, a lot of struggle that comes with that. And there's a lot of folks that whenever they hit this level, what happens is they bounce right back down to level 2. And that's where they stop, right? That's where they stay stuck. But for those folks who step out in individual expression and they keep expressing, we have a special name for that. That's level 5. This is the level of discipline. Discipline. I think that's spelled right. This is when we are doing those fundamentals day after day after day. We're working those muscles. And if you go to the gym day after day after day, it gets a little bit easier. You don't necessarily have the same pain day after day after day. Now, if you do that long enough, you'll get to the level of experience. It's one thing to go to the gym. It's another thing to go to the gym in the winter, right? When you get up and it's cold outside. And you have these different challenges, right? And then the top level is the level of mastery. Now, this is the complete opposite of level 1. If level 1 is highly reactionary, level 7 is highly proactive. Proactive. That's the way we are. Now, I will tell you this, people will make decisions in their life based on their level of awareness. It's not just their intelligence, it's their level of awareness, right? The example that I use whenever I teach pharmacists, this idea is it possible that anybody on planet Earth doesn't have some clue that smoking may be bad for them? Right? If you go and buy a pack of cigarettes, it's taxed out, there's all this tax on it. There's warning labels all over it. There's pictures like you shouldn't do this. Yet what do people do? They still do it. Like, is there anybody here that doesn't know how to be skinny? Like, I think we all know how to be skinny. But we don't do how to be skinny because sometimes we hang out with the herd. Right? That's what can happen. So we need to recognize that we make decisions based on where we are at in this particular spectrum. Now, I want you to consider this. I have a neighbor, and my neighbor has an ill-behaved dog. Now, for those of you that don't know my neighbor is my mom, and her dog is so poorly behaved. Oh my goodness, it's awful. Absolutely awful. And I'll tell you this, if that dog gets a bone, you want to know what you cannot get from that dog? You cannot get the bone from the dog. You cannot. Because you come because what level does the dog operate on? It's literally an animal. And if you try to take the bone from the dog, your dog may take my hand from me. Right? That's how it goes. Now, why does the dog do that? It's because it thinks there may never be another bone. I cannot give up this bone, right? That's where we are. The dog operates from a place of scarcity. There's only one bone, and it better be mine. There may never be another bone, so I'm not going to let anyone near it. Now, on the other end, keep in mind that the other end is the opposite, right? If this is scarcity, this is abundance. This is where we at the other end. Mastery is a place of abundance. It's where we've gone through these past experiences, and we know that there's another bone out there. We know that this is not the last bone on planet Earth. And you know what? When you get to be at this level, you actually know how to get another bone, right? That you're able to see how that comes to be. Now, I share all of that as a bit of a background and framework because I'm going to suggest to you that tithing is often misunderstood. There's a lot of folks that view tithing as a tax, as a debt, or as some type of obligation. And maybe that's the way you were taught. It was taught that this is something that you have to do. Right? This is something that you have to do. And I want to offer you a bit of an attitude adjustment this morning. And the attitude adjustment is this, is that there is a world of difference between something that you have to do and something that you get to do. There's a world of difference between those two. And giving, tithing, serving is not something that we have to do. I want to challenge you to think of it this way. Giving, tithing, serving is something that we get to do. All right? Now, I want you to think about this. When God delivers some blessing to you, He wants you to celebrate. He wants you to celebrate that. Do you have to celebrate, or do you get to celebrate those blessings, right? Parents, how many of you like blessing your kids? Right? That's something I think we like to bless our kids, right? But, and I would suggest to you that God very much likes blessing us, right? But what happens whenever your kid doesn't handle the blessing well? Do you want to keep blessing them, right? You get like, well, hey, I keep doing these wonderful things for you, and you take it for granted. You abuse it. You're not using it in the way that I wanted to do. And so I think that's something that we need to just keep in mind. Do you want to keep blessing someone who doesn't handle their blessing well? Or worse, do you want to keep blessing somebody who demands that blessing? And I think the answer for that is quite possibly no. So I want to suggest to you this morning that giving and serving is a form of worship. We have a core value here at Cochrane Community Church of worship, right? And I'm going to suggest to you that giving and serving is a form of worship. It's saying, God, you have given this to me, and I am grateful, and I'm going to give some of it back to you, right? I'm going to give some of it back to you. It's acknowledging and growing from our connection to Him. And really, that's what we're going to see that's going to happen. As we go through this process of giving and tithing and serving, it's moving in this direction of connection. No connection, great connection, right? I'll put a couple of pluses, all sorts of pluses up here, right? That's what we go through. When we When we are giving, when we are tithing, when we are serving, it is a way of us actually being hands and feet for God, right? It's our way of staying connected to the vine. It's our way of staying connected to the source. And so I wanted to suggest to you this morning that the practice of tithing and giving can change your life. It sets your mind in a different place. It sets you to a place that's of abundance, that's of generosity, that's of prosperity. But it also requires faith. It requires faith, and it requires reliance on God. And whenever we take these steps of giving and serving and tithing, we actually, with wherever we are, it forces us to move up a level or two, right? Giving is an act of worship. So I have 5 principles today that I want to share with you on tithing, and I guess I'll do that on the other side here, maybe. 5 principles to consider. First thing I want you to consider is this. Number 1, start where you are. Start giving wherever you are. Now, I will tell you this, whenever you decide to start giving, whenever you decide that you're going to start tithing, there's all sorts of questions that will come to your mind. Well, at least I think they'll come to you. These are the questions that came to my mind, which may just give you an insight into how my mind works. But, one of the questions that came up is, do I tithe off of my gross pay or my net pay? Has anybody ever done that? Just me? Okay. It's like, what do I do? And the best I can figure out, the answer is yes. That's about as sophisticated as I get, right? Start where you are. There's a lot of people that get worked up about their giving, and should I claim this on my taxes? My best advice is yes. Start where you are. I don't know the right answer for that. I would throw this out. What if, for whatever reason, you cannot give monetarily? What if you find yourself in a place where you cannot give monetarily? After all, we've got these taxes, like inflation right now. Like there's a lot of challenges that are out there. Now, I don't know your situation, but I do know this. Start somewhere. Start where you are. Even if your giving is $1, start there. Start at $1. Now, if you don't have $1, if you don't have the money, start by serving, start by giving. The idea is that you want to bring forth something to give back in honor and worship of what God has blessed you with. The note that I put here, this is a note for the candy people. Just as a show of hands, who has their favorite candy bar as a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup? I really thought that would... Henry, maybe. Let's take a step back. Who has heard of a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup? All right, we've got that. All right, now, have any of you ever seen the commercials on TV? What is the tagline for a Reese's Peanut Butter? Not sorry, Reese's. Not sorry? That's not the one I was thinking of, but that is one. There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. I'm going to suggest to you that there's no wrong way to give. There's no wrong way to give. Now, I have a couple of stories here. One, whenever I was in junior high, I was selling a lot of baseball and football cards at my parents' store. Like it was a big deal back in the late '80s, early '90s, and it was a little bit overwhelming. Right, all of a sudden, like at the time, my parents' store was in the downtown mall in Meadville, just a few blocks from the junior high. So after school, all the junior high kids would come down and buy baseball cards and football cards, and all of a sudden, I found myself with a little bit of money. Now, whenever I was a kid, money came to me and it was smoking. Right, I had a place for it to go. Like I knew what, but at a time, I got to the point where there was more money coming to me than I knew how to spend. And I was like, well, what do I do with this now? What do I do with this now? And my mom says, Jesse, this is how my mom talks to me when she needs to correct me. I get the full name. It's Jesse, and it's sort of with that cadence. And she says, what are you tithing of what you're selling here? And at the time, the answer was, well, nothing. I don't know. I had no idea how to keep accounts of what was going on. I had no idea how to figure out, do I tithe off the revenue? Do I tithe off the profit? My answer to that is yes. I mean, you just start where you are, right? Start with where you are. And I remember coming in here one Sunday morning, and I remember taking a $20 bill, because I had sold a couple of baseball cards that week, and I put it in the offering plate. And I will tell you that the next week was even better. It was even better. Like I was like, wow. And I found that as long as I was as long as I was diligent in offering something. I don't know if I was offering 1%, I don't know if I was offering 200%, whatever it was. As long as I was consistent with doing that, that was keeping me connected, and there would be continued blessings coming down the road. Now, I'm not a very sophisticated person, but I will tell you this, at one point, life got busy, and I lost track. And here's a question that I think that some people may have. Is it possible to owe God? Is it possible to owe God? I think the short answer is yes. I think it is very possible to owe God, and I think it's very possible that we owe God a lot. I'll go so far as to say this: we owe God more than we could possibly repay. Matthew 18, turn with me if you will. We looked at this scripture last week. We're going to look at it at a little different angle this week. Matthew 18, verses 23 through 27. Jesus is telling a parable. He says, "Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, he owed too much. The master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this the servant fell on his knees before him. 'Be patient with me,' he begged, 'and I will pay back everything.' The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go." The story of the ungrateful servant shows a servant who owes the master 10,000 bags of gold, more than he could possibly even think about repaying. And I'm going to suggest to you that that is us. That is us. We have no capacity to be able to pay God back what we owe him. So all we can do is start where we are now. Start where you are right now. Maybe you decide that you're going to start tithing, but you've been working for 5 or 10 years. You have a little bit. Do you owe back tithes? I don't know that the answer to that is yes. I think the answer is start where you are right now. And the other note I put with this is always be generous with your time and your talents. You can always give your time and your talents. Now, the next thing I have, number one is start where you are. Number two is give 10%. Give 10%. Now, why is it 10%? I don't know. That's about as sophisticated as I would suggest to you, though, that it seems to be the perfect amount. It seems to be the perfect amount. It seems to be just enough to get your attention, but not so much as to hinder us. And I would suggest to you that by giving 10%, it keeps you connected here. It reminds you of who God is and what he does. I want you to know this. God isn't, I guess, it doesn't have to stay at 10%. You can start at 10%, and if you want to, you can give more, right? If you really want to get into studying this, I will tell you, if you go to the New Testament, there's a couple of stories of people interacting with Jesus, and Jesus gives them some instruction on giving. The first one is this. God says to the rich prince, he says, sell everything and give it all away. Give it all away. That's in Luke chapter 18 through 30. We're not going to read that today. We're short on time. There's another story, the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Zacchaeus, what does he need to do? You need to sell and you need to give away half, right? So I want you to know that 10% is a place to start. It doesn't have to stay there. It doesn't have to stay there. You can always give more. But I also want you to know this. God isn't after your money. I don't believe he's after your money. I believe what he is after is your heart. I believe he is absolutely after your heart. He is after your attention. And I would suggest to you that in these stories, Jesus is prescribing those amounts because that's the amount that these people need to give so that they can give God their attention. I don't know where you are today. I don't know what percent it has to be for you for God to get your regular attention. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 100%, I don't know. But there is some magic percent for you. And I'll say this. I think there's a next level to this. It's not just money, but again, we're talking about giving of our time and our talents as well as our treasure, right? I think that for some of us, it's not necessarily a money thing, but it's a time thing. For some of us, it's a talent thing. I remember, Trace, maybe I wrote this down, and you may have to correct me. But at one point, every year, Sunlight, or every other year now, Sunlight closes between Christmas and New Year's, and they redo the floors, right? They strip and wax the floors. And at one point, the idea was this, is I believe we were handling all that stuff internally. Like we had people from the church that would go and do that. And I remember somebody saying, well, why don't we just ask people for money to do that? Well, I think we do outsource it now, but at one point it was, this is an opportunity to serve. That's what the Motzing Center is. It's an opportunity to serve. Could we hire people to do it? Yes, we could hire people to do it. There's a financial model that can make that work. But the idea is this: we want to go up in our connection, right? You want to give of your time, you want to give of your talents. And what does that do? It's going to draw your connection up the ladder, right? That's what we're looking at. There. It's the opportunity to tithe our time and to serve. And it's a great way to connect with God with this type of giving. So number one was start where you are. Number two, 10% is a target. Number three, start now. Give immediately. Give immediately. You can give immediately of your treasure. Like you could pull out your checkbook or your credit card or whatever, and you could actually do something about that right now. But do you give immediately of your time? Do you give immediately of your time? You know, you can, I would suggest this, you can give immediately of your week by serving on a Sunday morning, right? Bob, I'm going to look at you for this. You can give immediately of your day by starting off on a prayer call first thing in the morning, right? It's setting aside, it's giving, it's serving, it's worshiping in some type of way where it's the first fruits is what you are putting forth there. And for those of you that have done that, for those of you that serve on Sundays, for those of you that start your day off in a devotion, for those of you that start your day off in a prayer call, for those of you that can remember what life was like before that, how has it changed since you have done that? How has it changed? Would you consider going back to the way it used to be? I'll tell you, it's really amazing. So many of the folks that serve on Sunday mornings, when you actually suggest to them, like, maybe you should take some time off, maybe you should take a week off, whatever, by and large, they're like, well, no. I can't see Jenny, but I think I can tell that Jenny is smiling back there. Like, you know, Jenny, if somebody said, hey, why don't you just put the guitar down for a week, there's part of you that doesn't want to do that. I know Trace doesn't like that. You know, that's just where, because it's a form of work. It's a form of staying connected, right? That's what this is about. Tithing and giving and serving is about increasing our connection to God. So, number 4. Start local. If you're going to give, you want to start with wherever you are. You want to aim for 10%. You want to start immediately, but start local. Start local. You should start locally and spread out. Pastor John reminds us that the local church is the hope of the world, and this is so true. Now, I'm going to expose you here to an unpopular opinion that I have, and you're welcome to disagree with me on this. But I'm a firm believer that so many of the various social and political challenges we face, not just in our communities, but in our country and in our world, is because the church has not been the church. That's my personal opinion. Now, I would tell you this. I think that the topic of abortion becomes less of an issue when the church is the church. I think the issue of gun control is not an issue when the church is the church. I think that the issue of drug addiction is not an issue is less of an issue when the church is the church. And I think there's all sorts of examples like that. But to do that, we need to be able to power the things that we need. And by and large, we need people. We need people. Now, some churches may need the money too, right? And you need all of those resources to be able to make those things go. And I'll say this, perhaps, those statements are too idealistic, but maybe you can also catch a glimpse of that as well. Maybe you can also catch a glimpse of a better future like that as well. And it's going to happen through giving and serving. It's going to happen those ways. Start locally and move outward. Last one, number 5, give privately. Give privately. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10 reads, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from their faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." Giving helps us avoid the love of money. It helps us avoid, giving keeps us tethered to the vine. It helps us see money as a tool to be used in appropriate ways in the service of God's kingdom. Giving starts the receiving process, and giving always comes first. Giving always comes first. God gives and we receive, and then we are to do the same, right? And here's a spoiler. You cannot outgive God. You can't. There's no possible way. So what are you going to do with all this information today? I'm looking at my clock here. It says 10:29. I'm going to try to wrap this up in the next 4 minutes. I'm going to challenge you this morning. One of the things that I have learned after doing this for a number of years, we can study Scripture, we can look at these different principles, but I want you to I want you to be able to do something with this when you walk out the door today. What do you do with this? And this is where I want to challenge you right now. I want to challenge you right now, if you don't have one already, I want you to set a giving goal. Set a giving goal. Don't just say, I'm going to wait for the paycheck to come in and then I'm going to tithe off of it. I want you to set a giving goal, because what that's going to do, that's going to draw you forward. It's going to draw you forward. Trace and I were away when the announcement for generosity for the generation, and like how about that parking lot, just as an aside? Like how nice was that to come into? And so we came back the next Sunday, and it was like, hey, what's your pledge for this? And I didn't even know what was going on. I was outside of the loop and or usually oblivious, right? And I will tell you this. I found myself in my basement praying to God, what do we give? What do we give? Now, I'm not going to tell you that, there's times that I feel like I hear God, and hopefully you don't think that I'm too weird about this, but there's these nudges, these prompts that I get, and He gave me a number, and I will tell you that I first thought, what? How is this even possible? Right? He gave me this number, and I'm going to tell you right now, the number was uncomfortable. The number still is uncomfortable. Who am I kidding? But here's the thing. You have to learn to not reject the number. When you set a giving goal, what it's going to do is it's going to draw you forward. Let's just say, maybe I can't, I haven't thought that through. You have to understand this. If God's going to give you a big goal to give, He first has to give it to you so that you can give. right? He's not asking you to give. He's not asking you to give out of your lack. He's going to ask you to give out of what he blesses you with. So if he gives you a big number, I want you to at least be open to the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, he has a blessing that he wants to give and work through you. Are you willing to accept that number? The idea is this. The idea is not just to give more. The idea is this: become more. Develop the disciplines. Get the experience. Serve others in such a way. Become more. It is an understanding that for you to give more, God must first provide more. You have to be open to this idea, and you have to be willing to accept it. You have to be willing to accept it. And if you're going to accept it, you have to be willing to stay connected to the vine who is going. You got to stay connected to the source who will provide this. As a reminder, the God who created the heavens and the earth can help you. As a reminder, the God who gave a son to parents aged 90 and 100, he can help you. The God who pulled a nation out of Egypt can help you. The God who raised Jesus from the grave can help you. He is an infinite source. And I want to remind you this morning that no matter where you are this morning, you are not too far away that God cannot reach you. I want to encourage you today. Take some time. And it doesn't have to be done today, but I want to encourage you to at least start this process today. If you do not have a giving goal already, pray about your giving goal. And be willing to stay connected to the vine. There's going to be the individual expression. There'll probably be a few lumps. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you stick with it, if you do the disciplines, you will get the experience. And you will find yourself closer and closer to God. That is what I have prepared for you this morning. We will wrap it up there.